chameleons in the book, and now books, I should say, and now we're going into a different genre. This being once again the early stages of hip hop. In this case, 1988. EPMD, Strictly Business. Josh.
Indeed. Yes.
Thoughts? Was it strictly business for you, or was it pleasure as well?
No, this album was pure pleasure for me. In fact, it like hit me like a sledgehammer listening to this album. I immediately responded to it on some sort of visceral primal level. I don't know what it. Well, I do know what it was, but it's the fact that it's a really good album. Can we give a little context here?
Yes. that EPMD is Eric Sermon, who would later be a part of a variety of things in the 90s, right? Some multi-person tracks and stuff like that. It's him and Parrish Smith are the two members of the group, and they are from Long Island. So there's a little bit of background. Yep.
Oh yeah. So our first Long Island hip hop that we've
Long Island hip hop
come across. Mm-hmm. And the thing that really stood out, well, there's a couple things that really stood out to me on this. The beats on this are incredible. I would say that that's kind of the hallmark of this album for me. It has a real like funk based sound to it, which I really responded to. How
familiar were you with EPMD before we did this, Josh?
That is a good question. I would say I think I knew them in name only. And I don't remember ever listening to this album. I think I probably saw them, referenced in kind of the history of hip hop type of articles or lists and stuff, but I don't think I ever listened to this.
Gotcha.
And both of them are kind of the lead MCs on this. I would say, unlike Boogie Down Productions or Eric B and Rakim, the DJ is kind of a less of a role in this, although he does get one track to showcase his talent. But
he sure does.
Yes,
that's a crazy track. Yeah,
that is. And but both of them as MCs are really great. I really love how they hand off verses to one another, and they really pair well together. And their beats coupled with that, I mean, that is the hallmarks of a classic hip hop album for me. The samples that they use, if you listen to this album, you'll recognize a lot of samples. I mean, they sample the Beastie Boys and Let the Funk Flow in one part, and
one of Matt's favorite band, Steve Miller Band.
Yep, and You're a Customer, and a recognizable Kool and the Gang sample from You've Got to Chill. So I think, sometimes the hip hop really searches for, deep, soul or funk cuts that may not be as recognizable, but this is kind of the first one where I'm seeing maybe more, I don't know, higher profile songs or maybe more contemporary songs.
Well, Run DMC had quite a few, like, Aerosmith and
that's true. Yep.
Stuff like that. Yeah,
it's probably ultimately just going to vary album to album for me. But the other thing about this is that a lot of these songs are real like party songs in terms of they have a really danceable beat to them, like I'm Housin' or the Steve Martin, which is kind of a funny. Like
very random.
Yes. It's it's describing a dance that you would do, and they call it the Steve Martin, which I find it hilarious.
And it is in reaction to another dance craze, the Pee Wee Herman. So like they felt the need to write a song about it different, which I thought lyrically it was funny but also baffling. So.
And is the Pee Wee Herman the one from Pee-wee's Big Adventure that he does on the bar?
Well, they said you're familiar with the Pee Wee. Yeah, so it has to be that, right?
Right.
And it's just like it seems so divorced from, hip hop or black culture that you're like aware of the Pee Wee, but then also like I'm going to do my own version of the Pee Wee, and it's going to be like another like definitively white guy like rhythmless dance on a groovy album. Like, so anyway, it cracked me up.
Yeah, but it's following that tradition of like describing the dance moves, in the vein of like doo-wop songs and like different
Digital Underground, the Humpty Dance.
Yeah. And
or shake to the left like your leg was broken. Yeah, good.
The other big sample would be Bob Marley on the title track "Strictly Business."
Well,
That's
there's tons more besides the three
Yeah.
we mentioned and that one. Yeah, I can keep going, but yeah.
But
yes.
I think what I really responded to, besides the beats, the bass is prominent in a song like "It's My Thing," which was just a great song. I think that was one of the singles actually, and I don't know, the way that they kind of flow and hand off the verses to one another really reminds me of Tribe Called Quest, which is coming up, and maybe like De La Soul and stuff like that.
I was about to say they're brethren from Long Island, De La Soul, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a lineage there as well. It's just, I mean, every song is really good, and it just kind of flew by listening to it, and every song that came up, I was kind of like moving my head and just really feeling it. So strong recommendation for me. In fact, this might be my favorite hip hop album that we've listened to so far. I have to double check, but it's and in terms of comparison, because I think Eric B. and Rakim and Boogie Down Productions are kind of neck and neck as the top spots right now for me, and they're different than those albums. You know, that this album is less not really crime focused in the way that Boogie Down Productions is, and like you said with the 5%ers, it's not like philosophical in the way that Eric B. and Rakim are, and less of a, there's not like that
doesn't
jazz
have like
influence.
Back to Africa themes, which was another big thing around this time. Yeah.
Right. They're not.
No judgment, but it's not here on this album. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Lyrically, it's not as standout as those two albums, or specifically the Eric B. and Rakim album are. There's just something about kind of the vibe. Again, the vibes. Maybe this show's subtitle is The Vibes, and I just kind of enjoyed the relaxed feel to it that this album had.
Yeah, this so we've started to see a shift in those two albums that you mentioned. The Eric B. and Rakim Paid in Full and the Boogie Down Productions Criminally Minded albums. But this is the first hip hop album we've done that moves it to, like, I think phase 2 of hip hop.
Yes.
This sounds like a thoroughly early 90s hip hop album. Now there's some that come at the end of the 80s that also fit that. They're all ones we haven't done yet, but I think they're the touch points that, Midnight Marauders, I think it's like 90 from Tribe Called Quest, right? And you've got De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising, right? It's coming in 89, I think. So it's coming.
Public Enemy still to come as well.
Yeah, but Public Enemy to me is their own lane to some degree.
Yeah.
Like Public Enemy doesn't sound like it's.
But they have a different MO.
Yeah. Well, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and West Coast is coming. Like and then the South is coming a little later. So there's also like mainstream big sample hip hop coming, like Young MC and Vanilla Ice and all these groups that took these massive, Funky Cole Medina is like Jamie's Crying, right? And Vanilla Ice is Under Pressure, and MC Hammer, You Can't Touch This is Super Freak, right? So all that's coming too. But the flow sounds like another era of hip hop. The production and sort of that idea of chopping up and cutting samples, right, and pulling from a variety of samples, and all the way the lineage of what came in the 90s, a little like what Puffy would do, like cut up these songs, right, that were identifiable and go back to the touch points of it, and and then Kanye West would do in his production. It's just stuff like that, right? But I think the flow on this is interesting because they almost function as one MC while they're distinctly two MCs, but their flow and their style is not like listening to, say, like the Wu-Tang Clan or multiple rapper group, like rapper group where there's distinct styles, right? They kind of operate in the same lane, would you say?
Yes, I would agree. In fact, they're not even like personality wise, you can't even kind of distinguish them from one another when you're listening. Like,
and their
sometimes
cadence and their lyrical content is extremely similar too.
Yep.
Right. Like one's not like boasting and the other is the philosophical guy or the wordsmith, right? Like they're kind of both, they're in that tradition of the early hip hop where a lot of these songs are about like, here's why I'm great and here's why I'm cool and here's why, I rock the party, right? That's the main theme, I'd say, on this album. And a lot of it, I think, is designed, as you said, to be, it still is that like house party vibe. And there's an undergroundness to this that also ties into what folks in like that consciousness hip hop movement in the 90s were going for as well. Like it does share a little bit of the lineage of that era too, while maybe not lyrical content wise, more like style of MC wise, if that makes sense. Like, that's the Q-Tip or like the Jurassic 5 and stuff, that they're much more sort of jazzy and groovy, right? They're not hard edged or like call and there's a lot of the rap we did earlier is like call and response, right? Or and then it certainly isn't like the harder edged like gangster rap, right? That's coming and that we haven't seen a ton of yet, as well.
It's
but
coming
like
soon.
It is. Well, and this album just sounds like, we said some of these other albums sound like the future, but this really doesn't just sound like the future. Like it is the future from where hip hop was that we've covered so far. So it's like, congratulations, you've now arrived at phase 2 of the journey. Starting with EPMD, and now the door is open for this next phase.
And it is, that's one of the first things I noted listening to this album, was that it sounded more modern, and I don't know what it is. It's just like when you listen to this back to back with some of those other hip hop albums, there's just like a production sensibility, or maybe the way that they put the songs together, that makes it sound, it's much more, it's like less choppy and less, I don't know, like less call and response. I think that's probably part of it too.
For sure.
And maybe the types of samples they use or the way that those are arranged makes it feel more modern. So this is a big...
their style of sampling, is much more what 90s and 2000s, 2010s hip hop tried to do.
I think that's probably it, in terms of why it sounds more modern. But this is a real great album, and a big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I knew you'd like this. So I actually was shocked we weren't covering this album. So like I had made a note to myself, if we had to do a bonus episode, like the others, it was sort of like on the fly, but I had made a note. I'm like, we're going to, I think even when I wrote to you the albums, like I wrote this one by itself and then I picked the other ones afterwards, because I was like, this was clearly going to be one I was going to do, because I felt it was really the only well-regarded hip-hop album that pretty much everybody mentions from the 80s that we didn't have on the agenda like previously, or gonna be having on the agenda. So I'm glad we did this one. I wasn't familiar with the totality of this album, but I knew some tracks from EPMD over the years, so maybe a little bit more familiarity. It's in their bio, they talk about that a lot of the stuff we talked about too, and I'm just reading it now as we go along, a couple different sites, but they said that they rarely varied from two themes: dissing sucker MCs, right, and recounting sexual exploits, which I didn't feel was a huge theme on this, so it must be in some of the other albums they lean a little heavier into that, because while there's a little bit of that, I did not feel that was nearly the lyrical focus that like sucker MCs and I'm so fresh, on the mic was on this specific album.
Yeah, I really only Jane, the last track, is like that, and that I found that kind of the weakest track on there.
I agree.
So yeah, maybe it was almost like it was like from another album, and they just like added it on. I mean,
I felt the same exact way. Yep, it felt like I added bonus to the point where I looked to see if it was an added bonus track, but it wasn't. So it also was a weird thing. It felt like this album, like with a couple tracks to go, I think they even mentioned like this is the end of the album, kind of, and then it was like, no, it isn't. You know what I mean? I'm trying to remember which track it is, but so then I thought, like, is the rest of it gonna sound like? Was it Get Off the Bandwagon that had a lyric that was kind of like, and this is the end of the album, and then it was like the DJ cut, and then Jane. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And that was my favorite track on this album. Get Off the Bandwagon was probably my favorite. I'm Housin' also is an album, and You're a Customer. They're my three favorite on this one. And like, by the way, You're a Customer of My Rhymes was basically what You're a Customer of, I'd like to say. Yeah. So, so I thought I'd bring that. I also love that the glory period for EPMD was 88 to 92, and then they did release 3 other albums. Let's see if you could see a theme here, Josh. Album 1, Strictly Business. Album 2, Unfinished Business. Album 3, Business as Usual. Album 4, Business Never Personal. Album 5, Back in Business. Album 6, Out of Business. And album 7, We Mean Business. So they did pretty much everything like that you can do as some sort of cliche with the word business in it. They have made an album with it in it. So kudos to them for being so thoroughly tied to a theme. In this case,
Indeed.
Business. Mm-hmm.
And this album I'm seeing was on the Rolling Stone list too, or at least one of the iterations. I'm trying to see, because Matt always gives that stat if it's on the Rolling Stone list. I'm trying to see if it's on the recent one. I don't know if it is.
We would be covering it if it was. So maybe it was an earlier.
It must have been on one of the earlier iterations. Mm-hmm. What did you think? You mentioned the DJ track, which is the penultimate track on that. What did you?
I enjoyed it.
I liked
DJ
it too.
tracks go, it's probably my favorite DJ track that we've done.
Yep. Yeah. I hope Matt gets to listen to this album, because I feel like he might appreciate it more than some of the other ones.
I feel this will be his favorite hip hop album we've covered. Is what my instincts tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to extend it out going backwards, so I apologize if you're listening on YouTube where you're like, why the hell are they talking about the Chameleons when we're in a like EPMD review? What do you think? I think that Matt will also enjoy that album, but maybe not as much as me and you did.
Oh yeah, I think he'll like it. I don't think it's his like. It's definitely probably not in his favorite like 10 post-punk post-punk albums.
But I think this may be the leader in the clubhouse for him.
Yep.
Hip-hop album-wise, but we'll see. We'll see how well we know our friend Matt.
Yes,
but I would say this one and Paid in Full are probably my co-ones right now as hip-hop albums go that we've covered, with Boogie Down Productions being 3. And a pretty clear top 3, with maybe License to Ill being 4.
Yeah,
and if we round out 5, Raising Hell.
Yeah, it is fortuitous that we are listening to it, because I feel like it is essential to this decade, especially to hip hop. So I'm glad we got to listen to it.
Yeah, I figured I didn't know how you'd feel about the other ones, but I was like, yeah, I know at least one Josh will like. Yeah. And hopefully he listens to this first, because it'll set the tone for him.
Yep.
So
I did listen to it first.
I figured you would, because I know you very well, and the hip hop is. You're excited about everything, but the hip hop really excites you. So I knew you'd probably eat dessert before, your main course at appetizer.
Indeed.
So thumbs up on this one. Thumbs up.
Yeah,
sure.
Definitely.